This video is a free tutorial to make the Buzzer Beater Scrunchie. I also have a PDF version available on my website and Ravelry. To knit this, I used the Queensland Collection Coastal Cotton in Spearmint and a US 7 16-inch circular knitting needle. Start by pulling out a tail at least 60 inches. We will then use the long tail cast on method to cast on 81 stitches. I will link to my tutorial for the long tail cast on method. Once you've cast on all 81 stitches, you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any rotated before you join in the round. I like to lay everything out and see the ridge that was formed from casting on is all facing the same way and not twisted around any of the needle. With your stitch marker, you'll slide it on the right hand needle and knit your first stitch on the left hand needle. Be sure to pull the working yarn and not the tail. You may need to adjust the stitches on your needle to spread them out evenly. Knit the first stitch on your left hand needle. After you knit the first stitch, I like to give that a little bit of a tug because sometimes there can be a gap created at that join. Continue knitting across all the stitches all the way around until you get back to the marker. Here I am 2 stitches before the marker and I will knit those last 2 stitches. Sometimes the first stitch gives me a little bit of trouble, so I just tug on that cast on edge tail and slip the marker and continue knitting around. We have now completed 1 round. You will continue until you've completed 20 rounds. Here I've completed my 20 rounds. I did change my stitch marker. I love my Cocoa Knit stitch marker. But to count your 20 rounds, you can count the number of V stitches in a vertical column. The stitch marker can be removed at this point. To close up the scrunchie, we're going to use a modified Kitchener stitch where you join the live stitches to the cast on edge. First, you'll need a tail at least 60 inches long. Before I explain the Kitchener stitch, I'm going to show you how this becomes a scrunchie. So the hair tie will go inside of the donut shape, and you'll tuck the ends around it so that they are scrunched around the hair tie. When you close up the seam, you're going to want to make sure that every single time you're catching the hair tie in between the knitting, and that's what creates the scrunchie. Here you can see the direction that we're going. Now the modified Kitchener stitch. The first stitch is the hardest because you want to make sure that you're matching the exact same stitch column to create this seamless join. With that 60-inch tail on the tapestry needle, you are going to insert your needle into the first stitch from right to left purlwise and leave it on. Now we're going to find the same stitch by following that V right down and noting what it looks like. It is the one right next to the tail, so that is going to make it easier to find. Now we can flip our work over. We know what stitch we're looking for and insert our hair tie so that when we go to catch our stitch, the hair tie is in between. We're going to be going through the V stitch that's created, and you want to go through both bars of the V. What we're doing is creating a mock knit stitch by replicating the V's that are created. Go ahead and pull that through. You want this to be snug to the needle, but you don't need to over pull on the yarn. We're trying to create the same amount of tension as the rest of your knit stitches. Going back into that first stitch, you're going to insert your needle from left to right knitwise and take it off the needle. So we will be purl on, knit off, which will start to make sense as you go. The first stitch is definitely the hardest, so now we can get into pattern. We will purl on the next stitch on the needle, go through both legs of the next knit stitch on the cast on edge. Once you've caught the hair tie in the first stitch, it's pretty easy to continue catching it. Now we will take the stitch off the needle by going through it knitwise. And if you want to start getting a little bit quicker with it, you can at the same time go through the next stitch purlwise. Go through every stitch on the needle twice, and that's what creates that V stitch, similar to how you have to go through both bars on the cast on edge. You're going through the stitch twice. Here I'm a little more than halfway through, and you can see that it creates a really invisible seam because it replicates a knit stitch and looks like you continuously knit this in the round. And I'm going to go ahead and weave in my cast on edge tail. This way it is hidden within the seamed scrunchie. You could also weave these ends in earlier. I just think it's helpful to have the tail as a visual cue when I'm going to join that first stitch to make sure that I line everything up. I just wove it in about 4 or 5 stitches and cut that tail. And I'm back to doing the modified Kitchener stitch. Now that I have 1 stitch remaining, I will do the same purl on. Sometimes the needle likes to slip out of this last stitch, so you do have to be sure to hold on to everything tightly. Work through the V legs of the cast on edge. These will be the last available V stitches, and then knit off. And you can remove your knitting needles. You're done with them at this point. Go ahead and pull your tail so it's nice and snug, but we aren't over pulling on it. To prevent any holes, we're going to go through the next stitch in the round just on one side of the V to close up any potential hole. And you can take your needle through the right leg of the V from right to left purlwise. This is just replicating the way that we got started on the Kitchener stitch. Next, I'm turning the work around just because I think it's a little bit easier to work, and I'm going to weave in the ends. I'm going to take the needle through the same leg of the V along a column a couple times. Again, I'm going to pull the tail through, but I'm not going to tug on it too much. And then I'm going to turn around and come back the other way. By creating that U shape, I'm going to prevent anything from pulling out. When I go back up, I don't work all the way to the edge. I go about halfway. And then I just maneuver the scrunchie around a little bit to be sure I didn't pull the tension too much. Then I will take the needle and stick it through an opening and push it through the hollow tunnel that's created and pop out just a few inches later. Now I will maneuver the scrunchie a little bit and give this tail a snip. Again, once I start maneuvering the scrunchie, the tail will be hidden inside and she is all done. I love this scrunchie. It's a great beginner-friendly pattern. You learn a few new techniques and you can finish it in a day.